can't do that to my Minecraft community. That's not fair. It's not fair to those guys. So let's take a look and see what we got here. When more has to plan? Probably next week. Minecraft needs Timberborn water physics. Actually, you know what? Here, let me put on a scent. And we'll go from there. All right, guys. I'll be back and we will start space news here. I hope you enjoyed Timberborn. We'll be back at it probably tomorrow. Why is there not enough time to play all these games? Question. Yeah, I know, man. I know. All right. I'll be back in a little bit.
Hi, I'm Matt Mellis. I'm an aerospace engineer for NASA, and I worked on the shuttle program for a good number of years. And I'm here with my colleague today, Kevin Burke, who participated in the acquisition and deployment of the 30 or so clips that you're going to see in just a few minutes. Now, and Kevin, thanks for being here today.
Glad to be here, Matt.
What you're going to see is what I consider to be the best of the best state-of-the-art imagery on both film and high-definition video that the Space Shuttle program is capable of producing today. And not only does it serve a technical purpose, and we'll get into a lot of that detail as we get into the movies here, but it also serves as an enormous inspirational and educational aspect for all of NASA's stakeholders. There's a number of intents that we have for this production, and one of them is to pay tribute and commemorate the shuttle program, which has essentially been a 30-year program, and it's nearing completion as we go to final print with this production. We also want to pay tribute to the men and women that made all of this imagery possible over the years of different missions and launches that we've had. And also to give a view that not very many people see outside the NASA family of these fantastic pictures that are used largely for engineering purposes, and to let everyone on the outside of the NASA family have insight as to what goes on with the shuttle when it launches. I think this is a very moving set of clips that you're about to see. We're opening here with this somewhat stylized view of one of the launch sequences that actually is going to play out in the upcoming clips. And I've got a little soft focus on it, and thought we would open it up with a couple of fun facts about the shuttle. It really is an amazing piece of equipment. It has phenomenal amount of fuel that it burns over the 8 minutes during its trip to orbit. And when they get up there, in that short 8 minutes, they're going about 5 miles a second, which is a pretty spectacular achievement for a piece of machinery. So this is how it all happens. This is how the machine does its job, and the film speaks volumes.
This is camera view E19. We commonly refer to this as Echo 19. And it's a 16 millimeter camera with a 10 millimeter field of view for the lens, the focal length of the lens. And it's running at 400 frames a second. So the effective shutter speed is really 1/1200th of a second.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I mean, this is all a slow motion event. And basically you're going to see the 6 seconds prior to launch of the vehicle as the space shuttle main engines turn on. Now, the purpose of this camera, they all have different purposes. Most of these, if not all of these cameras that you're going to see in this production, are engineering cameras to look for different engineering aspects of the launch process. And so the purpose of this one is to check to make sure ignition is going off okay, which is what you're seeing here. Main engine start is just happening, and you can see the engines are starting one at a time. This particular camera looks at engines number 1 and 3, right? Is that what this is?
Yep.
And so you can see them, they're starting to fire up. Those sparkers that you see are there to make sure that any unburned hydrogen gets ignited before it floats around and collects in some place where it can ignite later and cause problems. Again, you're seeing the engines sort of turn on here. And so we're roughly coming into about 5 seconds before liftoff. The computers are checking and validating that everything's A-OK. And there's a little bit of a pitch over that the whole vehicle does as a consequence of these engines thrusting off the center of gravity. And when the whole vehicle snaps back and is straight up in the air, the engines or the boosters ignite and the whole thing takes off. Great photography here. I mean, you can see all this flow phenomenon going on inside the engines. Now, the space shuttle main engines are burning hydrogen and oxygen, and I'll talk about some of the fun facts about that later on in some of the other clips that you're going to see. But here you can see the engines have stabilized and everything is A-OK. And in just a few moments, you'll see the boosters fire off. Did we talk about the time code? I can't remember. So.
No, we haven't talked about the time code. The time code that you'll see, the LED display on the right-hand side, is actually positioned between the two sprockets on the 16 millimeter frame. And the time code is UTC time code. It's an IRB format. And you'll see that it's 21 hours, being UTC at 5:02 p.m. local time, 2 minutes, 11 seconds. And the 3 digits that are moving in the upper right-hand corner would be representing 1,000th of a second. The solid number 1, the second digit from the top, is indicating the synchronization of the camera is more of a technical parameter. And that is on every camera to synchronize the field of view, synchronize the time.
This is pretty cool. You can see some of the oxygen, that cloud of vapor there was from the oxygen fuel umbilical. Of course, the solid rocket boosters have now ignited, and the whole vehicle is lifting off the pad. And you can see sort of the glory of this moment. I mean, there's an enormous amount of fuel being burned. One little thing that I love is if you look at the sky in the background, and this was a very clear day. These pictures were selected, or these movies were selected because of the wonderful photography that we got on this day. And you can see the sky deep into this dark blue. And that's because, as Kevin will talk later on, that we got into color correction that we do post launch to make sure that we're capturing all of these the events that are going on, all of the flow events. So here the vehicle is clearing the pad, and we're on our way.
This view that you're seeing here is camera E8 or Echo 8, and it's a 16 millimeter camera with a 10 millimeter lens.
Yeah, you can see the boosters now coming off the pad, and one of the amazing things that a lot of folks don't know about the shuttle is bolted to the mobile launch platform is it's basically through 4 bolts on each solid rocket booster. And the intent of these cameras is to watch that bolt, which is an explosive nut bolt arrangement, and the bolt weighs about 100 pounds, I should say. And these nuts fracture, and the bolts slap down into a holder that you're actually sort of seeing in the foreground here. And they literally release the vehicle from the pad and allow it to take off. So for obvious reasons, we have a camera on each one of these explosive hold-down posts, and to make sure that they're operating. They're a critical aspect to the launch process. We want to make sure that they're operating good. So you can see that puff of smoke coming out. And actually, if you want to put the remote on a frame-by-frame stop action, you can actually see the flash as it explodes. Now, Kevin, here's where you guys really did a fantastic job of capturing the detail in the plume through this automatic aperture on the cameras. You want to talk about that a bit?
Sure. Many of the 16 millimeter cameras that are on the MLP and pad structure have an automatic exposure control. It's the only real way to keep the exposure, the high dynamic range exposure, from pre-ignition of the SRBs through the liftoff out of the frame of view. So the camera has basically an automatic exposure.
Right. Now look at the sky on the left thing, and see how it gets dark. Actually, on both sides, you can see how it turns that deep blue. That's the automatic aperture in action right there, right?
Allowing it to see the detail in the pad structure and also in the flame.
Yeah. I mean, when you see a launch in real life, you can't see any detail with the naked eye in the plume. It's just like looking into the sun almost. It's so bright. We can see some of the water from the launch pad. There's a cooling water that comes out. We'll talk about that later. That's splashing onto this quartz protective glass that the camera's behind. Of course, they're in these explosion-proof containers, right, to keep the cameras safe and sound. No cameras were harmed in this in the making of this movie.
That's right. The cameras are in an explosion-proof box, which is nitrogen purged, and the quartz glass on the front protects the lens. In most cases, there are some cases where there's damage, and if that's the case, the lenses will be repolished, reground, or whatever's necessary to bring them back into optimal condition. Well, Matt, this next view coming up is Echo 18 or Camera 18, and it's a 10 millimeter lens, and looking at the TSM or the tail service mast carrier disconnect.
Yeah, the umbilicals, there's one on each side of the orbiter, one for the liquid oxygen fueling and one for the liquid hydrogen fueling. Those are primary purposes. You can see there's a lot of other instrumentation on these things in feed lines. But these cameras, their intention is to make sure we get good retraction of this. And there's actually a huge 20,000 pound mast that pulls these things inside the tail service mast for the door to slam shut and protect them from the hostile environment on the outside. Now these umbilicals are about 4 feet wide by 6 foot tall, so you don't really get a sense of scale when you're looking at these in these movies. But they're as big as an average sized human being, so they're quite large.
One of the interesting photographic challenges that we run into in photographing the TSM carrier disconnect from the inside of the tail service mast is once that door closes, it's pitch black in there. So there's a set of series of tungsten lamps that provide illumination, and the vibrations, the tremendous amount of vibrations that are induced during the liftoff, really rattle those lights, and keeping them from having those bulbs break has been quite a challenge. In fact, they are in the process of changing those lights over to the new LED arrays that provide more stability and less frequency of having the bulbs go out before the film runs out.
They're a lot more robust to that kind of environment.
Okay, Matt, this is Echo 001, and this is one of the 4 cameras on the edges of the MLP deck. This camera happens to be on the northeast corner of the MLP deck, and it's a 16 millimeter camera, as all the ones on the MLP are, and 10 millimeter focal length. It's a wide angle view, and the effective shutter speed is about 1/1200th of a second.
For our viewers, you can see that we pulled a little bit away back from the vehicle now. We're taking a little bit of a wider view. There's the SSMEs just firing off there, and you can see the plume in the background growing. In fact, if you look carefully against the plume there, you can see a couple of cameras. Why don't you mention what those are, Kev?
Those are some OTV cameras, operational television cameras, that are used for surveillance of the vehicle. They and are piped back live to the launch control complex. The signals.
So the SSMEs are firing. You can actually see the launch tower on the right-hand side of the screen. And again, they go on for about 6 seconds. Computers are making sure that everything's working. And at T-0, those boosters are going to fire, and you'll see a big puff of smoke come out of the flame trench there, and it'll get sucked back down in as the boosters come off the pad. And these two sort of structures, one standing just to the left of the left booster and one standing just to the right of the right booster, are called rainbirds. And there's some piping sort of flat against the launch pad as well that sort of connect all these things together. There go the boosters firing. And all of this fresh water, 300,000 gallons to be exact, comes pouring out of those rainbirds and onto the launch pad to deaden the acoustic noise and cool the pad down. So that's where the water comes from on some of these camera shots.
And here you can see the AEC, the automatic exposure control on the cameras, taking over as the booster plume comes into view, and allows to see the AEC allows you to see the detail both in the plume as well as in the vehicle and the structure itself. And you can also see very good detail on the deck of the MLP.
Now, we talk a little bit about the purpose of each one of these cameras, and this one is to look for some structural anomalies on the vehicle, some thermal insulation failures we might have on the tiles or the blankets, etc., and how the water is getting dispersed on the pad. And also we're looking at debris, and actually you can see here that we've got quite a bit of debris in the field, and debris is a big concern for the shuttle folks, and we want to keep an eye on it to make sure we don't have anything that's going to threaten the vehicle.
Now, Matt, you can see that this is camera Echo 4, E004. It's on the corner of the MLP deck, and very similar in field of view to the camera we just looked at. One of the things I like to point out is you can see one of the camera box enclosures we were talking about a little bit earlier on the left-hand side of the frame, right in front of the left SRB.
Yeah, and in fact, as we mentioned earlier in the piece, there's about 125 cameras or so, actually more, that document any given launch. And so, for brevity in this piece and to make it watchable, we had to have a lot of film hit the cutting room floor, and it was really difficult for me to cut a lot of it out because I loved all of the footage. I'm a fan of each and every camera, but that little camera there didn't get its day in the shade. That film of the booster had to. We'll have to have that for the director's cut in the future.
And just to give you a perspective, this camera originally captured this scene at 400 frames a second. So it's being played back at 24 frames. So it's about 1/16 of the speed that it was actually captured at to give us a real-time view.
Now you can see here how absolutely gorgeous the day was. And as we mentioned earlier, it was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So in the film industry, they call this magic hour, and there's no question about it that this is one of the best times of day to take photographs of the shuttle. You have these rich colors and just a beautiful blue sky to sort of highlight all of this. So I find these pictures second to none in all of the launch imagery that's been taken. I should say that these boosters shed about 10,000 pounds of mass per second once they're lit up. And that's each, so it's 20,000 pounds combined. And you can really get the feel of that awesome magnitude by looking at these images. There you see a piece of debris on the right, sort of doing a ballet in slow motion there. This is some tie-down string from some water membranes under the SRBs that we'll talk about in a few moments. You know, teams go through this. This is engineering footage, and the teams go through this and identify everything they see in it.
Okay, this is camera Echo 36, and this camera is located on the fixed service structure at the 255 foot level. We refer to the fixed service structure as the FSS. It's a 16 millimeter camera with a 16 millimeter focal length lens, and the effective shutter speed is about a 1/1200th of a second, similar to some of the other ones that we've seen.
This is a long clip. In fact, this is probably the longest clip that I sort of chose for the production. There's a lot going on in here, but it looks a little boring for a while because those engines are on for a long time. So we're still at 400 frames a second here, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So there you see the main engines igniting. You can see all of this water pouring into the flame trench. There's the big flash, the hydrogen and the oxygen lighting up. I should tell you that coming out of that external tank, inside there, the cryogenic propellants, liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen, 750 gallons a second of liquid hydrogen is pouring into that engine cluster, and 280 gallons a second of liquid oxygen. All of these things being combined effectively instantly to create this fantastic combustion process, burning 3,000 pounds of propellants to turn it into water vapor every second, and it's almost invisible when it comes out of the engines. So the engines are turning on now, and you can sort of see them glowing against the water pouring into the flame trench. That water's there primarily to deaden the acoustic noise and to keep things cool. And you've got a good look at the belly of the orbiter here. One of the purposes of this camera is to look to see if we lose any tiles due to the shock of ignition of the solid rocket boosters. Now, you're going to see the boosters turn on in just a couple of minutes, and you see those red sort of ribbed surfaces there inside the flame trench. Those are actually membranes to hold water, and those will get burned away, and you'll sort of see that in the film when the boosters fire. There you see them right there, and there's water in there that's sort of getting jarred loose and turning into steam. And I'm assuming, I don't know for sure, that it prevents sort of a recirculation of the exhaust at liftoff. Probably again acoustic deadening noise. And there you see those boosters firing off. If you look in the upper left-hand corner, you see the umbilical falling backwards there. And then look at how the space shuttle main engines are punching through that water in the flame trench. That's really cool.
Yeah, it is quite a dramatic shot, and you can see the auto exposure control on the lens, as we've talked about on some of the other views, really helping to be able to see the detail on the SSMEs punching that hole, as well as looking at the plume from the SRB, and seeing the edge of the belly of the orbiter too.
See, the SSMEs aim a little bit off kilt there, and you can see them hitting the upper part of the mobile launch platform as they rise off. Amazing that they capture all that detail in the SRB plumes. It's good stuff. It's a fantastic clip. It really is.
This is camera Echo 41. This is on the fixed surface structure on the FSS at the 255-foot level. It's a 10 millimeter focal length on the 16 millimeter camera. It's a really interesting view, and Matt, you want to provide some more details about what we're seeing?
Yeah, you can see the boosters have already fired, and this big umbilical structure that you see swinging back is actually very massive. The plate on the end of that is about 1.5 by 3 foot square. You'll see a close-up of that in a little bit. That's the ground umbilical to hook up to the venting for the hydrogen tank, and it's got some nitrogen and helium purge lines and some instrumentation to go with it. Pretty complicated structure. You get a picture of that in a minute. If you look at the MLP, or the mobile launch platform, you'll see all the water coming out of the rainbirds under the launch pad. And again, our active exposure kicking in there and giving us a great shot of the plumes as the vehicle clears the tower. Look on the right, you can just see a tad of the SSME burning there, that little blue cone. Fantastic detail there, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a great shot. Echo 40 is one of my favorite shots, Matt, and this is on the fixed surface structure on the FSS at the 275-foot level, just a bit higher than the two previous views we saw. And this is really an incredible view of not only the orbiter, but the beautiful ocean, the late spring day in Florida, and very nice lighting on the tank, and as well as you'll see on the orbiter surfaces.
Yeah, it truly is magic hour on this. That orange tank, for those that aren't all that familiar with the shuttle, that's foam. That's insulating foam on the tank to keep the cryogenic propellants cold on the inside. Liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen are pretty chilly when they get into their liquid state. You can actually virtually look into the cockpit here. If you look carefully, you can see the ocean right through the window, just briefly there for a moment. Kind of fun. There's Discovery in all its glory. This engineering view is to look at any possible issues with the tiles or the thermal protection system on the vehicle. And look at that. Absolutely gorgeous. You can see some of the flakes of ice sort of tracking the vehicle as it moves upwards. Remember, as we mentioned earlier, that 3,000 pounds of water vapor a second is coming out of the space shuttle main engines on the back. It's pretty incredible, and it's virtually invisible. All right, this view is of a structure we call the GUP, which is the ground umbilical carrier plate, which attaches to the ground umbilical carrier assembly, sometimes called the GUCA. That plate is about 1.5 feet by 3 foot. It's a sizable plate. You don't really capture the scale in this, and you can see the vehicle is now lifted up and it's taking off. That umbilical peels back right at solid rocket booster separation, or detonation.
And Matt, this is camera 33, and this is on the FSS. It's at the 235-foot level, and is using a fairly long focal length lens. And you can tell by the field of view that it is a long focal length lens, and it's 75 millimeters.
Now, if you look, you can see the boosters kind of surging. It's not a continuous pass. It's sort of pushes and then slows down a little bit. And what you're seeing there is the natural frequency of the booster thrust. I believe it was on the order of about 7 hertz, 7 cycles a second. And you can see that go by and hear the aft skirt of the boosters going by with a really nice tight shot of the exhaust.
This camera view is on the pad perimeter. It's located at camera site 3. It's about 1,273 feet away from the vehicle, and it's the first in a series of the 35mm cameras, which we'll be seeing in the upcoming sequences. There's a lens on here. The focal length is 500 millimeters or so, and the effective exposure is a 1/450th of a second, and the camera's running at 180 frames per second.
Yeah, it's a beautiful shot, and this is going to, as Kevin said, it's first in the 35mm shots. They're a little better quality because they've just got more surface area to put an image on. You can see the SSMEs firing and all in nominal operation here. And as soon as they pull away from the pad, you'll see the left booster in the background, centered between the 2 service tail masts. And just a gorgeous shot right there, looking at the steam coming off the SSMEs. And this is a fantastic capture of what remains behind after the vehicle clears the towers. You have all of this water and steam being pushed around in this amazing hostile acoustic environment. I mean, look at what's going on there. This is all acoustic noise and shock coming from the boosters and the SSMEs.
Camera 63 is located on the pad perimeter. One of the camera sites. It's 1,270 feet from the vehicle, and it's using a 105mm lens. The camera's running at 180 frames a second, and that's pushing about 630 feet of film through the camera per minute. Quite a fast rate, especially for 35mm.
Yeah, you can see the sparkers going there, just getting ready to turn the main engines on. And in the background, you see the water tower. That's where all that fresh water comes from to flood the pad, to keep it chilled and deaden a lot of that acoustic noise that we've already seen what it looks like in the plume. Absolutely gorgeous day, really accentuated by this shot. Blue sky in the background. Goes great with the white exhaust plume coming out there. And you can see a lot of splashing and stuff jetting out from all different directions at the bottom. You'll see more of that in the shots that are coming up. This shot is going to be the first of a bunch of different views as we march counterclockwise around the pad to look at it from different angles. And there you can see the boosters have fired, and you see it all coming out the other side of the flame trench. And beautiful shot of it coming off the pad.
And the lighting at 5 o'clock in the afternoon on this late spring day is just about perfect from this camera view. Of course, it won't be perfect for all the views, but certainly is a nice angle and really illuminates the vehicle as well as the structure very nicely.
Yeah, I like when the vehicle leaves. I left a lot of these shots run long because I thought it was kind of neat to see what happens afterwards, and you can just see the whole service structure here being engulfed in steam and exhaust from the solid rocket motors.
Now, one interesting thing about this particular 35mm format is earlier we mentioned about the time code. And the iRig time code is burned in with an LED display, and on the 35mm format it's actually in part of the image area because the 35mm format has 4 sprockets per frame, so there's no way to position the LED time code in between the sprockets like we can on the 16mm views.
Right. So if you looked at the 16mm, you could actually see the sprockets at the top and the bottom of each frame, and those aren't visible in the 35 as you see here.
The camera number is on the lower right hand display of the LED time code, and it's in this case it's camera number 62. So the 35mm format also allows us to put a camera designator number that's fairly often used just to help for viewing purposes and tracking purposes. This again is a 105mm lens and is on the pad perimeter, approximately 1,270 feet from the vehicle.
Look at the absolute force that all of this stuff is coming out of there. I've talked earlier in the piece about how much is coming out of the solid rocket boosters, 20,000 pounds combined, and then the SSMEs are losing 3,000 pounds of liquid propellants a second. And that really shows up here when you're looking underneath the launch platform. You can see that all of that stuff doesn't have anywhere to go, which is why it's vectored out on both sides, so it can be sort of safely directed away from the vehicle, so there's no rebounding or sort of backflow, so to speak.
And one thing we haven't had a chance to talk about earlier is how the cameras are triggered. Currently, the camera's all triggered using the POX, or the photo optical control system, which triggers all the cameras on the pad perimeter, on the fixed surface structure, as well as the MLP. And it's quite a sophisticated system to synchronize and trigger all the cameras based on the launch clock.
Yeah, it's undoubtedly a very complex system to have all these cameras operate flawlessly for each launch. They're very important, if not critical, for shuttle launches, and it's an amazing achievement that all the men and women who work on this are able to do it with such a degree of reliability every launch. Another shot here is, as I said, moving around counterclockwise. You see the SSMEs, or the boosters, are just firing, and there you see the gut falling back, as we talked about earlier, the umbilical assembly.
This view is using the same 105 millimeter focal length lens that the other two views we just looked at, and again is about 1,200 feet from the vehicles where the camera site is located.
You know, this was a really unusual day, because you just mentioned earlier that, you know, from all views is the lighting going to be as good, but this is about as good as it gets. I mean, each and every one of these camera views is well exposed, both from an engineering and a beauty standpoint. They're all very, very nice shots. And it's why we selected 124 to be the predominant content in this movie. There's the water tower, by the way, in the foreground. It's just about to get engulfed with the exhaust.
This is a Dog 68. It's a 35 millimeter camera, and it's really intended to be a documentary camera. So it's running at 28 frames per second, not really a high-speed camera. So it's almost real-time, a real-time camera view. It's just a really beautiful shot, and because it's a documentary camera, we're able to enlarge the aperture so that the timing block isn't taking up image area, and present it in its widescreen view, and I think it's quite dramatic.
Yeah, from a beauty standpoint, this is probably at the top of my list for favorites. It's just gorgeous quality, fantastic color saturation, and very unusual for shuttle photography to be so beautiful at the same time.
So Echo 55 begins our series of tracking cameras. Echo 55 is mounted on a kineto tracking mount, or KTM, which we commonly refer to it as, and it's located at CS1 about 1,200 feet from the vehicle.
This is a nice shot because you can see there's a bit of a distortion cloud here that we're shooting through, and what that is hydrogen being burned off from the fueling system. They burn off any excess hydrogen to safely combust it, and so that's what we're seeing here, and it's really gorgeous as the vehicle sort of comes out of that and goes into its roll program, clearing the tower. Again, just a fantastically well-lit photograph on this day. Some of the white things that you see falling off there are paper covers, which protect some of the order maneuvering system engines. We'll talk about those later. But Kevin, these are all manually operated, right? I mean, there are human beings behind the scenes doing this tracking now.
Yes, this KTM, or the kineto tracking mount, has about 4 cameras that are mounted on it. And this particular camera, Echo 55, is one of a pair of cameras and is intended to look at the top half of the vehicle, while the other camera is intended to look at the bottom portion of the vehicle.
Right, and we'll see that in the next shot. We'll have one of the one of the views from the bottom of the stack on the next one. In fact, our intent is to have in the deleted scenes on this disc a set of camera pair views sort of pieced together so you can see them simultaneously. So look for that in the extra features. This is a fantastic. Now they're completely done with their roll program and sort of on their way.
Yeah, the intent of that camera shot is only for the first 1,200 feet of the ascent. Is really the intention of that view, and that takes about 18 to 20 seconds, I believe.
Okay. Now this is camera 52, and this is, of course, is at the bottom of the stack now. So it's a little different view, and but part of a camera pair again.
Right. This camera is, as you said, is 52, and this is located on camera site 2, and is about the same distance, 1,200 feet, 1,270 feet from the vehicle.
Nice shot of the SSMEs there. It always amazes me how transparent the exhaust coming out of the SSMEs is.
Now this kinetic tracking mount is controlled by an operator, manually controlled by an operator who's sitting in the LCC on the second floor below the firing room. And the person, he or she, is using a trackball to track the vehicle. And it's pretty tricky because they're just looking at a little video monitor, and the vehicle is moving much faster in real time than we're seeing. We're seeing it at 1/5 the speed in this particular case of what it is in real time. This kinetic tracking mount also has HD TV cameras that are mounted that are used for what we'll call quick look, what's called quick look, to look at these views in real time and then in near real time when they start the image analysis. This is done while the film is getting processed and transferred.
That was a fantastic shot, seeing the sun go right in between the two plumes. And in fact, it gives you an idea how bright these plumes are to the naked eye, because the sun, as it passed through there, wasn't much brighter than the plumes that you saw. Wonderful shot showing the column of fire that the vehicle rises on, and it really contrasts nicely with the blue. Again, highlighting why STS-124 was really the correct mission to sort of springboard off of, to show all the beautiful film.
This is camera 57. This is at CS6, again 1,200 feet from the pad or so, and we're looking at the bottom half of the vehicle. As I mentioned earlier, the camera is mounted on a tracker. A KTM tracker has 4 or 5 different cameras on there, and this is the lower half film camera looking at the bottom of the vehicle.
And you can see the paper covers come off the RCS engines. Those are Tyvek covers, just same kind of material that you put on your house when building it. And those covers are there in case they get a squall or a little storm while the shuttle's out on the pad. Not uncommon in Florida, and we can't afford to have water inside those engines, so we put those paper covers on there, and they have these little parafoils that inflate, sort of tear the cover off. They're just adhered with an adhesive of some kind. So you'll see a lot of that white paper coming off during these launch shots. Beautiful shot looking up the tail end of the stack. And possibly on the deleted features or the deleted scenes on this disc, we're going to try to edit a piece together showing the camera pair, the views from the camera pairs pieced together, and it should look pretty nice. So look at that on our deleted scenes feature on the disc.
This is Echo 225. As you can see, it's already in flight. It's a really interesting view. It's a medium range tracking camera. The mount and the camera are located at UCS 4, which is about 2.4 miles north of the pad.
One of the reasons I selected this shot to be included on the DVD is because I thought it was really striking and really beautiful how in their roll program, as they went into their roll, the sun sort of peeks over like it does here, and you can see the name pop out, and slowly the whole orbiter becomes lit with the evening sun. And the textures are fantastic here. You can see the thermal blankets, you can see some of the thermal exposure to the thermal blankets, you see some variation in color, and you can see the tiles literally make out the boundaries of the tiles there. So really a wonderful piece of footage and a remarkable contribution to the DVD from a photography standpoint.
The lens that's on the camera is an 150-inch Bashir lens. It's a cat-eye dioptric lens, so it's got a mirror surface. And it's about 4,000 millimeters focal length if you converted the inches to millimeters. Just to give a perspective, Matt, the weight of this lens is about 250 pounds, just the lens itself. It's a huge lens and really unbelievable piece of optics.
You can really see a lot of nice textures on this shot too, on the booster. If you look at the forward part of the booster, you can see the access panels and that big line coming off of the external tank. That's actually the oxygen feed line on the external tank. That's where that 280 gallons a second of liquid oxygen are flowing through to the main engines. That feed line's about 17 inches in diameter, so it's a pretty beefy system.
And I think another thing to point out here is that this camera mount is manually tracked. So the operator is looking through a bore sight at the camera site, launch vibrations going on all around him or her, and keeping that vehicle dead center in the frame. And it's quite an amazing feat to be able to do that quite so accurately.
Yeah, they've done a great job of keeping on target every step of the way. Now they're getting a little further away, obviously, and you can see sort of the glow of those engines starting to come up against the bottom part of the stack there, as they call it, and lets you know that something's going on at the back end of that vehicle.
So the next series of shots we're going to see is the views from the HD cameras. And in this particular view, this is from STS-114, Return to Flight. So this was in July 26th of 2005. And we're about 2 miles from the pad, just south of pad 39B here. And the camera is cocked at a 45-degree angle to enable maximum use of the 16:9 aspect ratio that is available with the HD TV cameras.
Now it's important our viewers take a good look into the left window there. You can actually see Eileen Collins, who commanded this mission. You can see her suit inside the window. Absolutely amazing. And this is a first, right? This is a first in the program. We started using high-definition video after Columbia. And that was one of the first times we saw this level of detail in photography.
That is correct. So this particular camera view is EHV 225. This was recorded on STS 117. It was in June 2006. And the camera is running at 60 frames a second, as all the HD TV cameras do. The orientation of the camera is cocked at 45 degrees to make maximum use of the aspect ratio of the 16:9 frame to get as much of the vehicle, space shuttle vehicle, in the frame as possible.
This particular shot I chose because it's well exposed and it shows a beautiful sequence in the roll program, but you also get this really nice vapor phenomenon as the vehicle accelerates to higher speeds. And this is not always visible to the for every launch. It's a consequence of atmospheric conditions, dew point, humidity, etc. So I thought it was kind of a nice touch to this particular image. This is the only long-range camera that made the final cut, and Kevin will give you the details about that in a moment, but I want you to look at the bottom of the tank there. As you saw, it just sort of became engulfed in flames. And you should know that this is a normal phenomenon in a shuttle launch. What's effectively occurring here is the exhaust gases coming out of the SRBs and the SSMEs are sort of expanding into the higher vacuum as they head into space. And the radiant heat from the expanded plumes becomes high enough to ignite some volatile gases that are caught up in this aerodynamic dead zone, so to speak, at the rear of the tank for a couple of moments during flight. But this is an amazing shot, Kevin, because it's from so far away, so why don't you explain what we're looking at here?
Yeah, Matt, the camera here is located at a place called Apollo Beach. It's within Cape Canaveral National Seashore, and the camera mount is about 20 miles north of the pad, so it's quite a distance away. This is a Bashir 150-inch lens, again about 4,000 millimeters. So quite a distance, and the tracker, as we mentioned earlier, is manually operated. So it's an operator looking through a scope and using a trackball to keep the vehicle in the field of view. It's also difficult for the operator because of the distance to see the vehicle at launch to sight the pad.
Yeah, it's just
so
a tiny point of light, right? So
he or she grabs it on the fly, and it's quite a skill level that needs to be developed in order to do that.
Well, and of course we watched our solid rocket boosters separate, which is sort of at the tail end of what we can see with all of the tracking cameras. And there you see our boosters coming off, and they separated about 29 miles in altitude, about 2 minutes into flight, and they are recovered by divers out in the Atlantic Ocean. And although they appear to be falling back here, they're actually traveling another 15 miles or so up, just tumbling on their own forward momentum before they peak and then come back down in the Atlantic about 150 miles out, where the diving teams pick them up and bring them back for refurbishment. So this sort of brings us to the end of our production. Hope you guys have enjoyed the commentary. Kevin and I have enjoyed doing it today for you. And as the boosters sort of fade out and the external tank and the orbiter continue on their way to orbit, we want to dedicate this movie to all of the men and women over the 30 years of the program or so that have committed themselves to capturing all of these fine images. It's amazing work. It takes a lot of commitment, and it's extraordinarily tough to do so. And our hats off to them. So, Kevin, thanks for doing this with me.
Thank you.
It's been a wonderful endeavor, and hopefully we'll see each other again on the next space program. So, signing off.
Dude, I made it back just in time. Just in time. Holy crap.
KTM, which we
Oh.
Discovery, go at throttle up.
Okay. Space news time. Ah. Rewind time. All right, dudes. So, we got about SpaceX postponed. Oh no. How much? All right, let's take a look. Get rid of that. Go down here. Corey's just posting some crazy stuff. SpaceX. All right. You guys want to go back to playing Timber more? I got a problem,
Discovery,
don't I?
go at throttle up.
That's 49-month resub. You guys want to go back to playing Timber more? Something went wrong, yeah. Tori's tweet is pretty funny. All right, we can go back to playing Timber.